In the view of the camera, you see a few things. You see a 15-inch American Girl Bitty Baby doll with a simple bonnet on it, and I'm going to tell you how to make that in a moment. But yesterday I had uploaded a video regarding the Nelly B weaving loom and different ways that you could make a thicker fabric to make a thicker, well, either replacement loops or just in general a thicker fabric. And I want to show you something on that today. This is Red Heart Super Saver acrylic yarn in cherry red, worsted weight yarn, and you can see what the square comes out like, and that is what I've made the bonnet out of. But for comparison, this is my absolute favorite wool, which is Lion Brand Fisherman wool, and all I have to do is crochet these off the looms. But I wanted to show you the difference in how they work up. Obviously the acrylic is thicker. The wool is, it's called a category 4 worsted weight, but it often knits and crochets and weaves as a light DK weight, I think. So, and you can see that in how narrow the strands are when they're stretched at all. Now what I'm thinking of doing, I really don't want to give up my wool. I love this wool for everything. I mean, and you can see it's beautiful wool. It's mainly for probably Aran style or fisherman style sweaters, but it's also wonderful for felting, dyeing, all kinds of things. And I think that's what I'm going to try. This is single strand worsted weight. Each of them, each took 16 yards to make a square. And this one, after I get it off the loom, I'm going to throw it in the washer. I've done this before, but I hand wash them. This time I'm going to machine wash them in with like the jeans and towels and things and see how much they felt. Because what I'd like to do, I have some wooden dolls here, and I have several ways I could make clothes for them. But I'm thinking, I have other knitted fabric that I have washed and shrunk just a little bit. And it's a little bit too thick for their size. If I could do something similar with a woven square, it would be wonderful. Now this is a weave it square sewn in half to make a little bag to hold a very tiny doll so I don't lose it. But this was, I think, Harrisville Designs Shetland wool in a weave it square. And this has been washed a few times, and you can see how it pulled together. If I could get this to act like that, then I can cut and sew clothes out of this much more easily than if it's loosely woven. Now the last time I did this, what happened was the yarn itself goes through a fulling stage, and it all fluffs up and widens out a little bit and settles in, and the squares came out beautiful, but they were wider. Each strip was wider rather than thicker or felted. So this time, that time I washed them by hand. This time I'm going to throw it in the washer and see how it does. Now on the acrylic, I did this one and washed it last night. Now this, being acrylic, barely changes when you take it off the loom. But I love this. This is it's a thin pot holder, really, especially being in acrylic. If I made like 3 of these and stitched them together, you'd have the thickness of the pot holder I made last night. Now I had mentioned in yesterday's video, I had 2 books in the video. One is the Nelly B book that I've actually had for about 10 years, and you know, have drawn on for different ideas and items. the other book I had found in with my mother's things. And that was the first time I had seen anybody else mention a potholder loom. And I hate to say it, but I think I'm still stuck on doing a potholder loom. Because look at how wonderful those colors are. These are the Wool Novelty Company Jersey cotton loops. I mean, can you just picture a twin-size quilt like that? Or a twin-size blanket? And the more you would use it, it would become like your best friend. It would be great. So I may still be stuck on that, which means I may end up, over a few years, spending almost $400 to make a potholder quilt. But in that book, the patterns that were in the book that was in with my mother's things, I could do the exact same thing with either of these yarns. But now you see why I was coming up with how do I make this thicker. Because even the acrylic, which is naturally puffier, is about half the thickness of a potholder. So that was the purpose in the video yesterday, was, you know, how do I get to this thickness without spending $400? So this, though, will be a wonderful way, if I can get this to felt into a nice flat fabric, this will be a wonderful fabric to make clothes for small dolls, like 1/12 scale, or my wooden dolls here are about 1/12 scale. They're a little bit off, but about that size. And this would give me, you know, 2 squares would give me a lot of fabric for small doll clothes. So that I'm going to try. Now, to make this bonnet, you could do it with 2 squares, and it would be wider and fuller around the face probably. You know, it would come down a little bit more. But this is simple with 1 square. Now, her ears are exposed, but you could put lace around here, just stitch some lace on and cover her ears, or you could put a pink bow in the front, or lace around the front. You could add something to it. Now, it's actually very similar to the apron I made yesterday. When you finish a square, you would make a 7-inch crochet chain stitch on this side, and then make 1 single crochet across one edge, and then make a 7-inch chain on the right side, on the other side. And that becomes the bottom and the back of a bonnet. That was the apron. If you stop there, you have an apron for an 18-inch doll. But to make the bonnet, that becomes the back and the bottom. So it would be sitting like that. And then what you do is you take about a 24-inch length of yarn, and let's say that your 2 chains are down here. So there's your chain on one side and the chain is on the other. You start here and just run a yarn on all 3 sides. You start here and end here in the center and the back, and then gather that. And what it does is just cup it around the doll's head. It's very simple. I mean, it's not fancy. You could make it fancy if you wanted to. It might be, like I said, more full with 2 squares. This, actually, after I get it fitted, I'll probably tie in a knot and then clip the knot very close so it doesn't even show. So that's a way. Yesterday it was an apron. Today it's a baby bonnet. And depending on how much, sorry about the light there, depending on how much you gather it, will either keep it snug on the head or have it slipping off. And you can position it a little bit. You can pull it more forward. So yes, it's square looking. And I don't know if I'm going to leave it like that or if I'll add lace, or if I'll make another one with 2 squares. But you can see how simple it is to make a bonnet. And then one of the other things I'm going to make for the 15-inch dolls are a simple sweater. So, I mean, that's a cute little thing to have, a sweater and a bonnet for a 15-inch baby doll. And again, if you have a child who has a baby doll and they can, that's what the bonnet looks like when finished. If they can make this themselves for their doll, like I said, it's plain, but how rewarding for them to be able to make these in every color for their baby doll. So there is a little bit more information on what you can do with the Nelly B weaving loom. This is the vintage wood version. This is the version, it's a little more, probably from the 60s, and metal frame. The WNC looms that I mentioned yesterday are actually Wool Novelty Company, and their more modern looms are wider and plastic, but there are vintage metal versions like this. So, Nelly B weaving looms, part 2. Now, a couple of things. I said when I was talking about getting stuck wanting to make one of, I said potholder loom twice instead of potholder quilt, and I apologize for that. I want a potholder quilt. I want a real potholder quilt, and I was saying potholder loom a couple of times. So that's one correction. The other thing is, I actually, when I made this yesterday, I made it for the boy doll that I have, the 15-inch boy doll. So a lot of boys would like dolls too. And it's always good to have boys nurturing if they want to. So the red is a color that either one of them can wear, boys or girls. And so this is, I used her as a model today because the boy doll is riding a horse somewhere. But you can see that it's the same on, obviously the American Girl Bitty Baby dolls are identical whether you use them as a boy or a girl. So it's the face and the bonnet and how you, how you put it on there, how careful you are with your baby dolls. So that was just a correction on potholder quilt, and that this is actually for a boy doll.